Welcome to the Inner Ascent. Today we explore a fascinating doorway into neuroplasticity and cognitive expansion, ambidexterity. How training your non-dominant hand can reshape the brain, improve focus, and unlock hidden abilities. Let's begin.
Welcome to The Deep Dive, the show where we take a complicated stack of research, notes, and anecdotal accounts and distill it down to the essential, fascinating nuggets you need to be well-informed.
Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into one of humanity's most compelling and persistent quests, ambidexterity. We're looking at sources that span from ancient yogic philosophy promising enlightenment.
The highest spiritual union, even.
Exactly. All the way to rigorous modern studies using, fMRI and PT scans to track brain activity decades after someone was forced to switch the hand they write with.
Our mission is, I think, crystal clear. To unpack the very complex claims surrounding this ability.
Yeah.
Does training your non-dominant hand actually unlock creative genius and spiritual harmony like some of these sources claim?
Or is the reality a little more grounded? Is it just a highly specialized motor skill upgrade with maybe some very specific and limited cognitive benefits?
We're going to begin by leaning into the compelling, really enthusiastic narratives that motivate people to undertake this, let's be honest, often tedious and frustrating training.
And then we'll pivot. We're going to ground ourselves in the scientific scrutiny. And you're going to find that the truth about brain balance is far more nuanced and maybe more surprising than just achieving perfect symmetry in your hands.
Okay, so let's start with the hook.
Yeah.
The really seductive promise that drives this entire pursuit.
The enthusiast's view.
Yes. And it all seems to rest on this classical, but as we'll find out, sometimes misleading idea of the brain-hemisphere dichotomy.
This is the foundation for, countless popular science books and self-help theories over the past, half century. It starts with a real neurological fact.
Right.
The left hemisphere of your brain controls the right side of your body, and the right hemisphere controls the left side of your body. That much is completely solid.
And then comes the popular theory, which kind of assigns these distinct personality traits and cognitive functions to those physical divisions. Our source material explains this perceived split really clearly. The left brain, which for most people governs the dominant right side of the body, is seen as the seat of logic, rationalism, language, quantification.
Critical thinking, the spreadsheet brain.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's the highly organized, structured spreadsheet brain.
And then, of course, you've got the counterbalance, the right brain. This is what controls the non-dominant left side of the body.
And this is the fun side, supposedly.
This is where it gets interesting, yeah. This hemisphere is historically associated with creativity, intuition, abstract concepts, spatial awareness, artistic ability. The theory suggests that many of history's great geniuses, the inventors, the artists,
The mold breakers.
the mold breakers, yes, they must be primarily tapping into this right hemisphere.
So if you feel like you're stuck in a left brain rut-all logic, no imagination, the logical conclusion, maybe ironically, is that you need to engage the other half.
But those, complex mental exercises can be difficult and really abstract.
Exactly. So the shortcut, according to this view, is physical. It's almost deceptively simple. If you just use both hands and both sides of your body equally, you are, by default, forcing both hemispheres to engage and communicate simultaneously.
It's marketed as the easiest path to whole brain integration. And the critical belief here, the assumption, is that the non-dominant hemisphere,
It's a creative side.
the creative, intuitive side, is somehow underdeveloped or, as one source put it, isn't exercised as often. And the quickest, most tangible way to stimulate that latent potential is physical effort.
It removes the need for abstract stuff. You pick up the pen with your other hand and you get to work.
Yeah. No meditation required. Just try brushing your teeth.
Which brings us to this really compelling personal anecdote that was detailed in our sources. It's about one individual who undertook this training, but not for genius or spirituality. It was for an utterly physical, almost aesthetic obsession.
So what was the initial motivation? What was the primary driving force behind this rigorous, self-imposed training schedule?
It was alignment and symmetry. This person was a dedicated yoga practitioner and an athlete, and they noticed and became genuinely bothered by a distinct physical asymmetry.
Okay.
Because they had done a lot of cycling. Their right leg was disproportionately stronger, and they saw it maybe even slightly larger than their left.
And that imbalance, that translated into how they felt in their yoga practice.
Completely. They felt incomplete or uneven in their yoga asanas, the postures. This wasn't just about performance, it was an obsession with aesthetics. They mentioned being focused on the symmetry of their jaw, their abs, everything.
So an athletic quest for perfect aesthetic and functional symmetry. They wanted their body to look and perform like a perfectly balanced machine.
You've got it. And their method was, well, it was extreme. They didn't just add a few left-handed tasks into their day.
Yeah.
They became obsessed with training only the left side of their body until it mirrored the right side's strength and control. This was a total lifestyle overhaul.
So what did that look like in practice?
Writing exclusively with the left hand, brushing teeth, eating, cleaning, even playing football, and only kicking with the left leg. They did this relentlessly until they felt the left side was functionally and, just as importantly to them, visibly equal to the right.
Wow. That sounds incredibly taxing. I mean, learning complex motor skills as an adult is frustrating enough, but doing everything that way must have been a constant source of struggle.
It was. But what's so fascinating is what happened next. The the non-physical consequences of this purely physical pursuit.
Okay.
Before the training, this person described themselves as the ultimate skeptic. Their entire world revolved around mathematics, rigorous sports science, logic, rationalism.
So very left-brained, according to the model.
Extremely. They said they detested anything esoteric, occult, or spiritual. They were, by their own admission, a super practical person.
Their entire worldview was anchored in that analytical, logical mode.
Precisely. And yet, as the left side of their body became stronger and more dominant in their daily tasks, their internal world, their whole landscape, it just radically shifted.
How so?
They reported suddenly becoming intensely interested in spirituality, in complex, abstract ideas like quantum physics, and even art, which is a big one because they said they'd been praised for art before, but never ever believed in their own ability.
That is a staggering personality shift. It really does suggest that the physical act of forcing the brain to route all those common tasks through the opposite hemisphere did, in fact, bypass some of the rational filters they had in place.
Absolutely. And it went beyond just a shift in interests. They reported developing a heightened sense of intuition.
Okay, intuition. What does that mean in this context?
They claimed to be able to anticipate events or people who were about to enter their life. And they even experienced these moments of instantly locating lost items with a sudden, unshakable certainty. They used the phrase, "I just know where it is." They felt their thought process became a lot more free, and their personality felt more artistic. And the final piece, they claimed their meditation practice deepened profoundly. They could achieve these deep, stable meditative states almost instantly.
That's a powerful, if, subjective testimony. It directly links the physical act of breaking a neurological habit, that default right-handedness, to the embracing of intuition and this esoteric.
And this intuitive, harmonious shift, it leads us directly to the more ancient, the energetic justification for ambidexterity, which is rooted in yogic philosophy.
Right.
Here, training both sides of the body is explicitly described as an unusual kind of yoga.
This takes the whole concept of balance out of the purely physical realm and puts it squarely into the metaphysical. We're now dealing with ideas of energy channels or nadis.
Exactly. Nadis are described in the text as these energetic vessels or channels that carry prana, which you can think of as life force energy.
Yeah.
And the philosophy focuses on three primary channels, Ida and Pingala.
And how do these relate back to that functional brain split we were talking about?
Well, they align almost perfectly with the bodily halves. Ida Nadi is associated with the left side of the body.
Yeah.
It's said to represent the lunar energy, feminine, cooling, introspective, inward-focused.
And that energy is managed primarily by the right creative hemisphere of the brain.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So the left-hand training is, in this view, activating the Ida flow. And the right side, Pingala Nadi, is the opposite.
The solar energy.
It's the solar energy masculine, heating, outward-focused, action-oriented. And this is governed by the left, logical hemisphere. These two channels, Ida and Pingala, are believed to crisscross along the spine.
And they intersect finally near the Ajna chakra, which is
Often called the third eye, right between the eyebrows.
So the goal then in this yogic practice is not to favor one channel over the other, but to bring them into perfect harmony.
Exactly. And when these two opposing energies, Ida and Pingala, are brought into a harmonious union, they activate the central primary channel, which is called the Sushumna Nadi. This state is sometimes called Ardhanarishvara, the perfect union of masculine and feminine energy within one being. The activation of sushumna is said to arrest the movement of the soul and bring the practitioner to samadhi.
And samadhi is that state of profound equilibrium and meditative rest. It's kind of the ultimate goal.
The ultimate goal. So this framework views physical ambidexterity as far more than just a motor skill. It's a direct, measurable technique for aligning the deepest spiritual and energetic structures of the self.
And it lines up with that personal anecdote. The person claimed that 7 to 8 years of slow, conventional yoga practice was basically accelerated or compressed because of this intense endeavor to balance their left side.
It's an incredibly powerful claim when you think about it.
Yeah.
That by simply mastering a physical skill, you can function at your best potential, unleash profound creativity for solving life's problems, and rapidly enhance psychic abilities and intuition, all associated with the harmonious balance of Ida and Pingala.
That narrative provides a tremendously compelling motivation. But before we all rush to swap our pens and start brushing our teeth with the other hand, we have to pivot. We need to bring in the cold, hard lens of scientific inquiry to see if these broad claims of whole brain power can really stand up to neurological scrutiny.
Because the brain is complex and evolution rarely leaves an obvious shortcut just lying around.
What's really fascinating here is how consistent this underlying desire for whole brain power has been throughout history. The claims we're hearing now are, in a way, just the latest iteration of a very old ambition.
Right.
An ambition that arose sharply right when scientists first started recognizing the specialization of the hemispheres.
You're talking about what, the turn of the 20th century?
Mhm.
When the idea of fixing this unnecessary asymmetry really took root in education.
Precisely. In 1903, in England, the Ambidextral Culture Society was founded by a head teacher named John Jackson. Their core belief was that since the two hemispheres were specialized, relying purely on right-handedness meant that society was, and I'm quoting here, wasting half of our potential to learn.
Wow. They genuinely believed handedness was a societal affliction that needed to be cured.
They did, and the claims they made were truly spectacular, a perfect historical parallel to the spiritual claims we hear today about unlocking genius.
So what were they promising? What was the outcome of this training?
They were extreme. Jackson proposed that with ambidexterity training, the hands would become absolutely independent. A person could, for instance, write an original letter with one hand while simultaneously playing the piano with the other.
At the same time.
At the exact same time. Or even drawing complex geometric patterns with both hands at once, entirely free of any coordination issues. They envisioned a brave new world of two-handed, two-brained citizens.
It sounds wonderfully efficient, but also completely exhausting. But it really does set the precedent for the neuromyth that we still kind of struggle with today.
Which is?
The idea that the brain is this machine that's only operating at a half capacity just because we don't use both sides equally.
And this is where we really need to definitively counter that core myth. The idea that the non-dominant hemisphere isn't exercised as often and therefore holds all this untapped power. It's just, from a neurological standpoint, fundamentally incorrect.
So all our behaviors use both sides of the brain.
All of them.
Yeah.
Even highly specialized one-sided actions involve the coordinated activity of both hemispheres. There's constant crosstalk. When you use your right hand to write, the right side of your brain is still heavily involved in spatial planning, motor sequencing, stabilizing your posture, holding the paper. It's never idle.
So even though we know neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change is real. The simple notion that just picking up a pen with your left hand automatically unlocks the full reservoir of right brain creativity is.
Well, it's misleading. It is. While training absolutely alters the brain's structure and function in response to experience, that's a given, and we know the brain continues to generate small numbers of new cells throughout life, the scientific evidence for generalized cognitive benefits from non-dominant hand training is just missing.
So no studies that confirm it boost your memory or IQ.
We do not have reliable studies confirming that forcing left-hand use confers broad benefits like boosting memory, raising IQ, or growing new brain cells beyond the specific skill you're practicing.
Okay, so if the brain is naturally asymmetrical, I mean, most of us are overwhelmingly right-handed, with the left hemisphere specializing in fine motor skills and language. Is that asymmetry a flaw that needs correcting, like the enthusiasts claim, or is it actually a functional feature?
Science overwhelmingly suggests it's a feature, and a highly efficient one at that. Asymmetry, or specialization, it evolved to allow the brain to operate with maximum speed and minimum conflict. Think about it just in terms of task allocation.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that efficiency argument.
Your dominant hand excels at precision movements, things like holding a scalpel, threading a needle, or turning a key with dexterity. Your non-dominant hand, meanwhile, specializes in stability and gross motor control, holding the object steady, providing a solid base, or gripping a bulky box.
So they have different jobs.
They have different complementary jobs. Brain asymmetry is an elegant system that allows us to perform two specialized tasks at the same time without constant internal competition.
That completely reframes the goal of ambidexterity. Instead of chasing this, non-existent perfect balance, maybe we should appreciate the efficiency of having specialized experts in our head.
Which leads to the scientific speculation about tampering. The cognitive scientist Michael Corballis, he raised the possibility that attempting to intentionally undo or tamper with this efficient specialized setup, it might actually invite psychological problems.
That's a strong claim.
It is. And while that's difficult to prove with trained ambidexterity, studies on individuals who are naturally ambidextrous or mixed-handed do suggest there could be potential cognitive trade-offs.
Wait, so the effort to be more balanced might actually make you less effective cognitively? That seems so counterintuitive to the whole goal of self-improvement.
It does, but the data is pretty interesting.
So what are those specific negative correlations that have been linked to natural ambidexterity?
Well, studies across different age groups have shown that mixed-handed individuals often perform more poorly than consistent left-handers or right-handers on a variety of cognitive tasks.
Like what?
These deficits appear in areas like arithmetic reasoning, rapid memory retrieval, and logical problem solving. Furthermore, there have been observed associations with certain language difficulties and even a higher reported incidence of ADHD-like symptoms.
That's a pretty serious set of cognitive costs. If natural ambidexterity is associated with poorer performance, what's the leading hypothesis for why that is?
The consensus theory is something called hemispheric indecision. Imagine your brain is trying to decide who's in charge of a complex task, like retrieving a specific memory or executing a sequence of arithmetic steps. For a strongly specialized brain, the answer is instantaneous. It sends the command straight to the most efficient hemisphere. But if that specialization is weak or mixed, the two sides might actually compete for control, which creates a delay, or worse, generates conflicting instructions.
So it's not that the balanced brain is inherently weaker, but that the lack of a clear, consistent, dominant leader creates this kind of neurological drag, slowing down the whole system's efficiency.
Exactly. The specialization is a functional shorthand that lets the brain operate efficiently. Constant internal competition just reduces the speed and clarity of cognitive function. And there's even some evidence suggesting an association between natural mixed-handedness and greater age-related decline in brain volume, though the causality there is still fiercely debated.
Okay, so let's zoom in on what the training does achieve in concrete, measurable terms. If non-dominant hand training doesn't give you generalized genius, what is the localized gain?
It yields highly specific, localized motor gains. And this is a key scientific finding. We can look at a 2016 fMRI study that tracked right-handed participants who spent a dedicated period, I think it was 20 minutes a day for 10 days, just tracing shapes with their non-dominant left hand.
And they got better at it, obviously.
They did. They achieved measurable, confirmed improvement in motor control. Their left-hand sketches became visibly smoother and faster over the 10 days.
And when they scanned their brains, where did that improved precision actually show up? What changed?
Well, it wasn't just a simple strengthening of the primary motor cortex, which is what you might expect. The fMRI revealed that the improved motor precision was strongly associated with strengthened functional connections between the hand motor cortices and a critical collection of structures known as the praxis network.
Okay, let's pause and define that for the listener, because praxis network sounds pretty technical.
Yeah.
What is it exactly?
The praxis network is essentially the brain's software suite for tool use and for skilled learned movements. It involves several regions spanning both hemispheres, specifically parts of the parietal and frontal lobes that manage the planning, the sequencing, and the execution of complex, deliberate actions.
Like threading a needle or tying a knot.
Or tracing a shape. It's the system that allows you to translate an abstract concept, like I want to draw a circle, into a sequence of precise muscle commands to make it happen.
So the training specifically enhanced the network responsible for skilled, deliberate action. That sounds powerful, but you mentioned it was highly constrained.
It is. The fundamental implication here is that practicing left-handed tracing makes you better at left-handed tracing. The changes are localized to that skill set. The researchers noted that the gains achieved in this very specific motor task may have, and I'm quoting, very limited value in carrying over to other complex tasks.
Like handwriting or playing an instrument?
Exactly. Sophisticated handwriting, musical performance, learning a completely different skill like drawing. The benefit doesn't seem to transfer well. You become an expert in the exact narrow skill you practiced, not a generalized motor savant.
So we've moved from this idea of a spiritual shortcut to the scientific reality of localized strengthening within the praxis network. Now that we understand the limits and the potential of these motor gains, let's look at the practical applied methods people use and the fascinating clinical implications of this kind of motor training. Okay, so transitioning from the high-level claims and the scientific constraints, let's get practical and talk about the actual methods for achieving functional motor improvement. For the average person listening, the low-risk approach seems to focus on coordination and integrating simple tasks into daily life.
This is the practical recommendation, yeah. Don't start by trying to, sign legal documents with your non-dominant hand. You start by challenging the deeply ingrained automaticity of your dominant hand.
Right. It's all about building awareness. Start small. Brushing your teeth, using the computer mouse, opening doors, or putting on jewelry and accessories with your non-dominant hand. It's incredibly frustrating at first, but it forces your brain to pay attention to movements it usually just takes for granted.
And then you can move on to more complex tasks like eating, stirring food, or practicing light kitchen work, always with some initial caution, of course.
You don't want to be chopping onions with your clumsy hand on day one.
Probably not a good idea. And for pure coordination, dedicated practice using something like juggling or just tossing a ball between your hands is really effective.
The goal here seems to be less about achieving perfect symmetry and more about increasing the functional flexibility of the non-dominant limb. This is often the focus in, say, physical therapy, right? Enhancing coordination and function, not just brute force.
Exactly. However, force is a factor when we start talking about specific strength training. This is a big topic among athletes, climbers, and grip enthusiasts who find their non-dominant hand is severely weaker. Our sources address this common dilemma using the example of hand grippers.
Yes, the classic question. Do you train both hands to the lowest common denominator, matching the load to your weak hand, or do you let your dominant hand continue to progress at its maximum rate?
It's a real sticking point for people. If your right hand can close a tough, say, 0.5 gripper, but your left can only handle the basic trainer model, training both at the trainer level would mean your dominant hand stagnates very quickly.
So what's the consensus from the experts?
The consensus seems to be push both hands independently at their own current appropriate levels. Let the strong hand get stronger.
But there's a vital caveat here, right? Regarding overall bodily mechanics and injury prevention.
The huge caveat. You shouldn't allow that differential to grow indefinitely. While you're training them at different resistances, the overall goal should be to maintain your grip and arm strength within 5% of each other for full stability and balance. That might require different weights or different rep schemes initially to let the weak hand catch up.
Okay, moving past strength, fine motor tacks are absolutely critical for dexterity, and our sources highlighted the cultural significance of a very specific tool. Chopsticks.
This is a great example of focused training. Using chopsticks requires incredibly complex, delicate motor skills. It demands high concentration, active muscle recruitment in your hand and forearm, and really precise spatial awareness.
So training the non-dominant hand with chopsticks is a validated strategy to quickly increase cortical excitability in the motor cortex.
It is. And this leads us to one of the most astonishing clinical findings in the whole field of motor learning: the power of illusion, demonstrated by the mirror box experiment.
I found this study fascinating. It was a randomized controlled trial, involved 100 healthy adults, and they were using chopsticks to move small red beans between bowls, testing the immediate effects of different training methods.
And this study was set up to compare two fundamental approaches: direct physical practice versus indirect visually driven simulation.
So the control group did what you'd expect. They undertook direct practice. They used their non-dominant hand to manually move the red beans, physically performing the task over and over again.
But the experimental group, they used the mirror box. They placed their non-dominant hand inside the box where they couldn't see it, and they moved the beans with their dominant hand while looking at the reflection in the mirror.
So the mirror created this powerful visual illusion where the brain perceived the highly skilled movement of the dominant hand as if it were the work of the clumsy, hidden, non-dominant hand.
It's designed specifically to exploit the mirror neuron system.
Let's elaborate on those mirror neurons because they're so important here. Why do they matter?
Mirror neurons are a really amazing population of neurons that fire both when an animal or a human performs an action and when they observe that same action being performed by someone else. They're central to imitation learning, to empathy, and to motor simulation.
So in the mirror box scenario.
The visually perceived movement of the dominant hand is so compelling that it activates these mirror neurons, and it essentially tricks the brain into simulating a successful motor action in the motor cortex that's associated with the non-dominant hand.
So the visual feedback completely overrides the actual clumsiness of the hand that's hidden in the box. What were the results? I mean, what happened with their coordination and dexterity?
The study measured coordination using something called the chopsticks manipulation test, or CMT, and overall dexterity with the Purdue pegboard test, the PPT. The findings were definitive. Both groups, the direct training group and the mirror training group, showed a significant, measurable, and immediate improvement in both coordination and dexterity right after the session.
And here's the truly incredible part for me. There was no significant difference in the functional improvement that was achieved between the group doing direct, hard training and the group using the visual illusion.
Exactly. Illusion equaled reality, at least for immediate gains in this specific fine motor skill. It implies that the visual illusion successfully and efficiently activated the mirror neuron system and the corresponding brain regions for the non-dominant hand, which rapidly accelerated that imitation learning.
So for unfamiliar, complex fine motor skills, the mirror box provides a low-cost, incredibly fast way to enhance cortical excitability and coordination.
It shows the immense plasticity and, frankly, the suggestibility of the motor system.
It really does. We focus so heavily on the physical gains, but let's circle back to the mind for a moment and using ambidexterity for psychological growth. Our sources introduce a really fascinating therapeutic practice.
This is the use of non-dominant handwriting for free writing. It's often utilized in the internal family systems, or IFS, model of psychotherapy, and it's a method that's really designed to bypass the conscious, rational self.
The theory behind it is quite simple. When you force your dominant, highly rational hand to write, the writing tends to be edited, logical, and it reflects your conscious thoughts. But when you switch to your non-dominant hand, the writing is awkward, clumsy, and slow.
And that intense focus on just the physical act of forming the letters, it drops the rational filter.
It does. The clumsiness forces you into this present mindful state. And that effort fosters a unique, temporary connection with the psychological parts of yourself, like an inner child or a defended part, that are usually shielded by the left hemisphere's logical filters. It lets you access material that was previously left out of conscious awareness.
And there was a specific application of this in the source material.
There was, in the case of a client named Sam, who used this practice to address a persistent intimacy avoidance pattern in his relationships. He used non-dominant handwriting for 15 minutes a day, just trying to talk to the part of himself that was driving this avoidance.
And what did that process, that writing, eventually reveal?
Well, Sam eventually connected with an inner child, part that was driving the avoidance. It stemmed from a really deeply rooted fear of abandonment and a lack of trust and vulnerability. And the physical evidence of the breakthrough was, well, it was poignant. He described a cathartic cry, and he said the pages were tear-stained and covered in this awkward, messy left-handed script.
So the part, which might be resistant to logical inquiry, felt acknowledged and respected by the sheer effort involved in the deliberate, slow, non-dominant writing process.
Exactly, and that led to an emotional release and a resolution of the avoidance pattern. It's a powerful demonstration. Even if ambidexterity doesn't grant you genius, it can clearly facilitate introspection and healing by accessing psychological content that our highly efficient dominant pathways typically suppress or just ignore.
Which brings us to the ultimate test of neurological persistence. What happens when the brain is forced to change its blueprint, not for a few weeks or by choice, but for decades?
We've established that training generates these specific, measurable motor and psychological gains. But the real test of neurological change comes when the training isn't a choice, but a requirement, a deep, permanent conversion.
We turn now to a seminal PE study that focused on adult converted left-handers. These were individuals who were naturally innately left-handed, but who, due to, outdated educational systems in German schools decades ago, were forced to write and perform other fine motor tasks exclusively with their right hand.
And they were successful at it, right? They became proficient right-hand writers.
Oh, absolutely. The study participants were just as proficient at right-hand writing as innate right-handers were. The entire point of the positron emission tomography, the Pete City study, was to determine if decades of dedicated, use-dependent plasticity, all that hard training, could entirely erase the original neurological blueprint.
Or if some signature of their original handedness persisted deep inside the brain.
Precisely. The researchers compared the converted left-handers to innate right-handers performing the exact same skilled automated task.
Which was?
Repetitively writing the German verb bellen, which means to bark, with their right hand. And they were looking at two things: their physical movements and their brain activity.
Okay, so let's start with the movements, the kinematics. What did they find?
Physically, the converted left-handers were indistinguishable from the innate right-handers. The movements were highly automated. All the quantifiable physical variables, speed, stroke length, and the key metric, the number of velocity inversions per stroke, which is a measure of automaticity, were identical between the two groups.
So on the surface, the training worked perfectly. The skill was completely mastered. How did the brain activity, the functional anatomy, compare?
This is where the deep dive reveals its most profound insight. The PE scans demonstrated a significant, persisting difference in functional neuroanatomy. The decades of practice could not erase the original blueprint.
Wow. Okay, so how did the two groups differ in their brain activation patterns?
For the innate right-handers, the brain showed the expected, highly efficient pattern. Strong left hemispheric dominance in the premotor and parietal motor association areas. This is the brain's normal pattern for a dominant right hand, where the left side takes primary control of complex planning.
And the converted left-handers, despite writing perfectly with their right hand, did not show that same clean left side dominance.
Not at all. They displayed a significantly more bilateral activation pattern. Crucially, they showed distinct, strong activation foci in the right lateral premotor, parietal, and temporal cortex.
Those are areas on the same side as the writing hand.
Exactly. Ipsilateral to the writing hand. This is the pattern you would typically see when a natural left-hander writes with their left hand.
So even though they were using their right hand to perform the task, their brain was still firing in a pattern that reflects an underlying, a covert left-hand preference. The original neurological wiring persisted.
That is the ultimate takeaway. The brain retained a functional asymmetry that was tied to their original innate handedness. And the right hemispheric activity that we see in the converted left-handers, it's just one of two high-level phenomena is happening.
And what are they?
First, it's possible the brain has to expend extra energy to actively suppress the innate, deeply embedded urge to use the left hand, which is still firing in response to the task prompt. Or second, it just reflects the sheer persistence of that covert left-handedness, meaning the preference for manual skills is permanently retained in the right hemisphere's motor association areas, despite the conscious choice to use the other hand. It's just functionally less efficient.
That's a powerful illustration of neurological rigidity. The effort to convert handedness doesn't necessarily create symmetry. It creates a unique, less streamlined bilateral pattern, even if the final physical output looks completely flawless.
And this leads us to the most important neurological distinction that the study made: the difference between simple motor output and higher order motor control. They tracked activity in the primary sensory-motor cortex, or SM1.
And that's often considered the executive motor area, the part that sends the final command to the muscles.
That's right. And what did that final executive motor area show?
I have a feeling I know where this is going.
Surprisingly, activity in the SM1 cortex was not different between the converted left-handers and the innate right-handers. The area responsible for this simple, final execution of the movement had been completely shaped by long-term practice. It demonstrated textbook youth-dependent plasticity.
Okay, let's just clarify this because this is a massive distinction. If the area that physically moves the hand, the SM1, is fully adapted and looks identical in both groups, where does the inherent preference, the difference, actually reside?
It resides deeper. in the planning and preparation areas. The asymmetry that actually defines your handedness seems to be permanently embedded in the cortical motor association areas, specifically the premotor and parietal cortex. These are the areas that handle higher order functions like preparation, selection, and kinesthetic representation. It's the deep blueprint for how to plan and select the movement sequence in the first place.
So we can kind of think of it like this. The converted left-handers learn to type perfectly in a second language, that's the right-hand writing. And their typing speed, their SM1 activity, is identical to a native speaker.
Good analogy.
But when you look at the deep language processing centers in their brain, the motor association areas, their brain still defaults to thinking and planning in its native language, which is the left-handed wiring.
That is an excellent way to put it. The brain's deep preference for planning and control remains fixed in those association areas. And it proves that while you can train the body to become ambidextrous, you're often just layering a new functional system on top of an original, deeply entrenched, and persistent neurological blueprint.
The ultimate takeaway is that training is possible, mastery is absolutely achievable, but true neurological symmetry, actually erasing that original plan, appears to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to achieve through practice alone. So this deep dive has spanned a remarkable journey. We've gone from the compelling, high-level spiritual promises of samadhi and heightened intuition all the way down to the specific, measurable activity deep inside the brain's motor association areas.
The synthesis is it's highly nuanced. The promise of ambidexterity as a simple shortcut to unlocking latent creative genius and effortlessly growing new brain cells. That seems to be largely a neuromyth. It's just not supported by broad scientific data.
In fact, for those born naturally mixed-handed, there might even be cognitive trade-offs associated with that hemispheric indecision.
Right. However, the benefits for motor skill, for coordination, and for practical physical balance are absolutely validated. We saw that fine motor tasks, whether you practice them directly or through the illusion of a mirror box, lead to immediate, measurable gains in dexterity by strengthening the brain's praxis network for skilled actions.
And significantly, the therapeutic application using non-dominant handwriting offers a powerful, low-risk technique to access profound emotional and psychological material. It helps you connect with parts of yourself that are typically suppressed by our dominant, rational thought patterns.
So we're left with this powerful paradox. While the brain's natural specialization, its asymmetry, is highly efficient, the conscious pursuit of balancing those motor skills is a profound path for both personal development and for functional control over our physical world.
The journey itself yields benefits, even if the destination isn't whole brain genius.
And this brings us to our final provocative thought. Considering that Pete's study on converted left-handers, the fact that their innate covert left-handedness persisted in their brain's planning centers even after decades of perfect right-hand writing, is the true value of ambidexterity training less about achieving neurological balance or symmetry, and maybe more about building a flexible conscious bridge.
A bridge. A bridge that allows us conscious access to specialized pathways that already exist, pathways we just rarely choose to use. And by doing that, we're improving the overall efficiency and resilience of the whole system, rather than trying to create a truly symmetrical brain. It makes you wonder if every suppressed talent, every skill we discarded in childhood, still retains a tiny, glowing neurological blueprint, just waiting for us to consciously reactivate it.
That possibility of buried potential is certainly food for thought.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into ambidexterity.
You've been listening to The Inner Ascent, where growth begins from within. If today's reflection resonated with you, consider sharing it or revisiting it later. Until next time, stay aware, stay curious, and keep rising.